That's good to keep introductions short. Oh, I gotta get rid of the thing that says, yes, I know we are recording. So welcome back to those who were here yesterday, and also welcome to those that are here this time. So the idea of this particular series of classes to give you some real basic information for the beginner. And so instead of thinking, oh, well, we're doing information to people that have a lot of experience and a lot of confidence, I've tried to come up with a variety of techniques using graphite as a basis just to get you started. And hold on for 1 second here. It was very timely. I just had a book delivered and I wanted to read something. This is from The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. I got my copy from Amazon, but he has a very, he summarized what I was trying to say very succinctly. So I just wanted to take a half a second to read it. Those who do not engage in the traditional arts might be wary of calling themselves artists. They might perceive creativity as something extraordinary or beyond their capabilities, a calling for the special few who are born with these gifts. Fortunately, this is not the case. Creativity is not a rare ability. It is not difficult to access. Creativity is a fundamental aspect of being human. It's our birthright, and it's for all of us. Creativity doesn't exclusively relate to making art. We all engage in this act on a daily basis. So I totally agree with that. And I think that through various educational processes, the creativity is been beaten out of us as kids. And as a result, it's hard for us to get back in touch with it. But if you think about how creative you are in your job, how creative you are in cooking, playing games with your kids, all that stuff. I mean, we all are creative. And my job is to try to give you a couple of pointers on how you can direct your creativity in creating drawing and being in the world of the creative world is very relaxing. It's uplifting, it's engaging, and it's a nice place to be when you want to have a little bit of escape from the rest of the world. So with that, let's get over to the other camera and I'll start working on part 2 here. Okay, yesterday, all right, I got it, a little thing here. Okay, so yesterday we did a whole survey of all sorts of materials to use. Kind of near the end, I have a couple more to introduce to you, but today what I want to do is be involved with talking about how you can kind of work with objects and assess them and then draw them, and also just some basic tenets about how you can organize space in a drawing. So I started off, I took a apple and I cut it in half. That's why it's kind of, and then break it apart. And so here we have half of an apple. And then I took that apple and I put it on a piece of my heavier drawing paper and I put it down. I traced all these shapes and I cut them out. And then I started assembling my own apple. And it was pretty simple. I just had the cutout, okay, folded it in half, and then took some double stick tape. Okay, and make sure I get the right part of the apple. And then kind of made cross sections of an apple as if I've sliced it apart. Oops, I think I put that in the wrong place, but that doesn't make any difference. Okay, I wanted 6 of them to show the different slices. Now, the reason that I did that is that it's a way of kind of understanding what happens when you look at an object at different angles. And I thought that if I would show you different cross sections, it would help you kind of understand that. So essentially, if you think about looking at, let's say, the apple, and that's why I wanted to kind of get it back together again so you can look at it more. I guess I could have just brought another apple, didn't have to be that one. All right, so, well, here's our kind of apple. We can kind of keep it just as a little thing here. All right, well, we'll get around to it. You know what an apple looks like. Okay, so in assessing objects, I mean, it's often thought, I believe it was Cezanne who kind of said that everything is made up of spheres, cubes, and cones. And I want to kind of focus on something very similar to that in the sense that, yeah, if you're looking at an object and you want to draw it, then if you can kind of figure out what the center is, your visual orientation to it, it makes drawing it a lot easier. So if you look straight on at an apple, then this is the shape that you see. If you're looking at it like that, and I start to rotate it, oh, look, we're starting to see a little bit of the top. So you see the side and the top. And as I come around, you see almost equal portions of the top and the side. And then when you look from above, it's strictly the top. So as you look at something, if you want to draw it, you might want to really pay attention to its orientation, whether you're looking at the top, looking at the side, or looking at a combination of it. And this is a way of kind of analyzing what happens. So I'm going to flip this over for a minute. All right, if you're looking straight on at it, you might be able to do justice. You think about, all right, there's a square. All right, and so this is the square that apple would fit in. Find the center of it. It's a geometric principle. If you go across like that, and like that, and like that. So if you draw diagonals and perpendicular and parallel bisectors, this is the very center of the square, which would put you here with the apple. And so that gives you a starting point. And then you can kind of look at it and say, all right, well, at the top, I can kind of see that there are a couple little lumps here, and then some here. And then it comes down. This is the widest. Same thing here. This is the widest. Down here, it's a little flat, but it comes down and then curves over and comes up like that. And then you get the thing like that. And if you're drawing lightly, you can get closer to what your shape is. Now, but you have another dimension. All right, so we'll just kind of make it look like you can see through it. So this apple, if this is like the center of this one, if I were to project this, it's going to stick out into space like that and come around here again like this, okay? And so if I would draw an ellipse along with that, then I'm getting a better sense about the form. So it isn't just a flat thing, and I'm not just worried about drawing an outline. I want to start to develop it so it has a little more substance to it. Now, in the case of this apple that I made, let's just take one section from it. This is looking at it straight on. But you can see as I start to rotate, you see what is happening. You're seeing, think about what the distance is between here and there. Okay, so that distance is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So think about, you have a flat piece of paper, and at this point, if I hold it here, I'll make a mark here and I'll make a mark here. So if I would measure from here to here straight across, that might be an inch, but then if I flip it over here, all of a sudden that same distance gets to be about 2.5 inches. So it's all in your perception of what angle you're looking at that. And then you get to that point, and it's just a straight line. So in terms of, let's say, just a plain circle, if you look straight on at the circle, it's like that. If you're starting to look more as the circle would twist away from you, then you're going to start seeing more of an ellipse. And then if it's really going away from you, you're going to see a sausage. And when you look straight at it, it's just going to be a line. And of course, the same thing happens when you flip it the other way. Now, when I was teaching at a community college, and again, it was like, a lot of people are just kind of beginning. I had them do a still life and see what happened. And when they would draw a stool, they draw the top, and then they draw the legs. And they were drawing what they thought they saw. And they identified with the top of the stool as a circle, and it's got legs. So that's how they draw it instead of thinking about that circle. If you're not looking at it straight down, it's a circle, but you represent that circle by an ellipse. And then that way, again, if you go here, you can kind of find out where the center is, and then you can put here, and as you go back, another leg would be here. So this way you can get something. If your goal is to do something that is a little bit more representational, then you really observe what you're looking at rather than what's going on in your brain as far as how this is made. So that's something that I really want to emphasize. Now, a lot of times, let's say that I'll move this over here a little bit. I noticed in the chat room, somebody said foreshortening, and that's correct. So that, if you think of a lot of paintings, in fact, the Baroque artists and the Renaissance artists took advantage of it. So if you would look up at a ceiling and you had people up in the like either angels or gods or something up, it looks like they're looking down at you. And a lot of it is because they really forced what that is called foreshortening. Instead of doing like a full kind of figure that is straightforward, like the Vitruvian man that Leonardo da Vinci turned into the circle, and then one of these deals. It's more like finding some way to foreshorten it. So instead of having the full length of an arm, it might be something more like this. So then it looks like that arm is coming out at you. All right, let's flip over. So what I often do is imagine, all right, what happens when, if you had to send this apple in a box. Okay, so I'm going to draw a little box here, and it's got 4 sides. And again, you know that a box has square corners, but these are not square. And it's because in the angle on a flat piece of paper, the way that I want to represent something that has dimension like a box, I have to look to see the way these things go. All right, so if that's the box, and I kind of show as if it were like plastic, these lines are all parallel, these lines are parallel, and the ones that are perpendicular to them are parallel on their own. So if I want to put this in there, then I can think if I draw the diagonal here and here, then there's a line that goes straight down from there to there. So that is going to be the core of the apple. Now, in terms of trying to figure out where the shapes are in, again, if I put a little mark here and do here, put a little mark here, then I know that this will be cutting that box in half. And so that's going to be like the apple center. Okay, as if I'd cut the apple the other way. Then I think about, well, how big is that down here? And that might be, again, down in this center, it's going to be like that. And up here at top, it's also going to be like that. So, I've got this apple that is kind of like this, and then it swells down across this way. And then I can see where it is around this way. And then so I can kind of carry that through. So in order to get kind of a way to think about that apple is if I'm kind of looking at it at this angle, there's my, basic shape. So I have a lot of space here, but again, what this is more like this. This is kind of like that, and it's like that, and it's like that. So you can see the way that develops to be more of a volume if you construct it, kind of using these geometric things. Now, once you do this, a lot of times you'll start getting accustomed to it, and you don't have to necessarily build all the box frame and everything. You can just know that as you're starting to draw this apple, you can think, all right, well, I got the top is a little bit smaller than, and this will be maybe a little rounder. This is more elliptical down here. And then if you join those together, there's your apple shape. It's not a total, it's not a sphere, it's apple shape. And then if I look at more of the detail of it, I've noticed up here at the top, I have different sections where it kind of comes to the center. And some apples have a little more obvious, have more bumps at the bottom, but then this one's pretty smooth. It really doesn't have those bumps. Like, with a Red Delicious, though, I think that there are these little bumps that come out. And then there's another one that's out a little farther, comes up like that. And then you get the stem. Now, we'll be getting into using value in a bit, but essentially then you can start working with light, which is a way of kind of helping you get form as well. So if light is coming in that direction, this could be a lot lighter, and the things that are facing away from the light. And as you get to the back of the apple, it's not going to get any reflective light that is also coming through here. So this could be probably the darkest part. And on this side of the pit, this could be darker too, because it's below the surface, and with light coming across here, it'll hit this part, but this will be in shadow. And of course, you can get involved with, like the little markings, little seeds and stuff, so you can get into even more detail. But for the basic form, you gotta get used to sketching. So get the paper. Don't worry about being perfect right to begin with. Just start thinking about how am I going to analyze that shape. So when you start getting more used to that type of thing, I'll bring a very basic shape here. We'll use this guy. And as I had mentioned, this guy's kind of weighted, so he always stands up. So that I might have to tape him down or something. Or maybe I'll hold him. All right, let's flip this over. Okay, so in this case, how are we going to analyze this? All right. I also have, all right, these are our two basic items here. And if I were to draw them as if I'm looking straight on, they're symmetrical along vertical axis. And so there's a circle up here. There's a cone here. There's a little rectangle there. This is somewhat like somewhere between a cylinder and a circle. Another shape here. Then it comes down across here like this.
Franz, do you mind
Yes.
pulling your sketchbook a little bit
closer?
Sorry.
Okay, I was in, yeah, I guess my pad kind of, sorry about that.
Nope, you're all good.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I got to try to look at my monitor at the same time I'm doing this. We had a discussion right before we came on about how easy it is once you get involved with projects, whether it's in the kitchen or drawing or something. It's so easy to get absorbed by what you're doing and details like, oh, nobody can see what I'm doing. And again, this is all symmetrical, so I've got some other circles and things like that. Now, this is a good point. So you can see that these are almost like stripes. All right, I'm not going to draw stripes across the way like that. I'm going to try to draw them that's more representative of the shape itself. The shape is curved, So those lines are going to follow the curve. And you can see that even I haven't shaded or anything, and already it's starting to have a little more of a not quite exact proportion, but just I guess he approves of what I've done in drawing him. All right, so now what's going to be different? I mean, this is the view, and the Egyptians did this a lot. It was the idea that you draw the view that is the most descriptive of what you're working with. So I think everybody's familiar, like, when you draw the pharaoh or something, the profile of somebody's face is probably much more revealing than looking straight on. But as far as the eye, if you really draw an eye from the side, it's more like kind of a triangle like that. But they drew it as if you're looking at the eye straight on. Okay. So the idea, and that also goes back to what I was talking about as far as a chair having a round seat and legs. All right. But if you're drawing the way that you're more apt to kind of see, then you don't always have to take, this is not necessarily the most, this is not the most fun angle. So it might be much more fun to try to draw it from the side or looking down on top of it. This is not a graphite drawing, but this is done with, these are called PITT markers that Faber-Castell makes. It's got a point and a thing on the other. But instead of drawing this elephant from straight on like that, I thought it'd be much more interesting to draw it more from an angle that's tilted towards you a little bit, and this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but kind of looking down at it, because then you get a better sense of the whole shape of the thing. So instead of drawing it just as if it's like that and kind of flat, I felt that it would be better and more interesting to do that. All right, so now with our guy here, you could kind of think about, all right, if I have him tilted a little bit, so it might be going like that. And I think, okay, in that case, it's going to be like this. It's going to be like this. It's going to be about like that. And then, especially in the face, it's up here like that. A lot of it is kind of the same. Am I off the page here? Let me come over here where you can see a little better. All right. So I'm going to draw it more like he's kind of tilted, and I'm looking a little bit more down on top of it. Not quite as much as if you were looking at it from my camera, but I'm still kind of looking down at it. So when I look at it, it's tilted about like that. All right. So if I were to draw like one of those little boxes to show where the circle is, then if I cut him in half right here, it'd be about like that. And then coming up there, if I get to the neck, it's about like that. And it gets a little bit wider around his neck. And then this is at the top where his head is, around here. And up here is like that. Okay, so just a way to kind of get another angle. All right, and on the ground plane, it's a little smaller. It's like that. So if I go and kind of, it's almost like going from dot to dot, coming up here like this, up like that. All right, then I've got the kind of little neck piece that comes around like this. And there's head. Now this could be the face part, but comes across here like that. And if I look at it, there's a seam. So that seam is coming down here, and it's coming down here, and it's coming across like that. And then I've got the other things that come in like that. So, and then the face center goes like that, then it comes across like that, and across like that. So then when I draw these, they're not circles anymore, they're more like ellipses. The nose is more like an ellipse. This eye is just more like an ellipse. This one barely is showing. And then this part of the mouth is a little bit bigger as it comes across. And then, of course, we could put in the okay. So if you're working on representational drawing, analyze your shapes, the way all this stuff is put together, and then you can sketch it. And none of these lines, I think what yesterday I mentioned that I like the softer pencils because I can get light lines, I can do these sketch lines. And then if I wanted to erase, then I could very easily go in there and get rid of a lot of those guides. And then, that could be the drawing. All right. So, you can analyze things in terms of I think a classic example would be, in a commercial sense. I had these figures were made by the Marx toy company. They were like the largest toy company in the United States forever. And I grew up in the 50s, so Mickey Mouse was on TV and all that stuff. But in fact, actually, instead of Donald Duck, let's look at Mickey here. So the Disney studios, if you're working for Disney, there are all sorts of people drawing Mickey Mouse, and they have stylistic charts that show you exactly what the proportions are and how to draw him. And so essentially, if you look at him, he is a bunch of circles. So you have a circle for the head, then you have a circle on the nose, then you have a circle for the ears. You have kind of like a pear-shaped body, and then you stick the arms off from there. So if you get those basic shapes, like his head, and then the bottom part is a little bit more like that, and then you got the nose, then he's got this smile that comes through and comes down like this. And then he's got kind of these cheeks that are up like that, up here, and he's got his circular ears up here, so he is here, up like that. And so, it's just kind of fairly easy to kind of break him up in terms of shape. So I played with these figures a lot, and I think my sense of how to put things together and form came about with all the toys and all the characters I work. So then when I go to draw them, I have an understanding of how they are volumetrically. All right, so that's just some real simple information about how to look at the symmetry of things, or if they're asymmetrical. There are a lot of interesting fruits. As far as finding things to draw, in addition to apples, things like gourds are a lot of fun to draw because not only is a gourd a shape, but it also has all sorts of different textures and different patterns. And again, as I explained here, if you think about like a plaid shirt, it's not winter, so we won't talk about flannel. But if you lay it down flat and it has stripes, then this is a pretty good representation on how to draw this. But once you put an arm or a body in that, then things change. So let's see if I've got somebody wearing a shirt. And those stripes will take on the form. So instead of being straight across, they curve over. And the sleeves on the arms, and if you have checks, same thing. You've got them coming. So you start seeing it develop kind of the way they do topographical maps. If you want to see on a flat map, if you want to see mountains or hills or whatever, you see it more like this. So instead of having a regular, this is cloth, and the way that they weave cloth, all these, if you put the cloth down on a table, be flat, and all these stripes would be perpendicular to each other. But once you put them on a shape, then it follows the contour of that shape. And so that, again, with the clown here, instead of drawing these lines straight across, that's going to flatten it. Now, the thing is, you don't have to draw like this. If you wanted to, maybe you want to very purposely do something that's very graphic. And so you like the idea of keeping everything very flat. So you might do something like this. And, there's nothing wrong with drawing like this. And then maybe you find some way for these to be really bright, flat colors. It's just that this will have a different effect as that. And that's why I refer to you looking to what you want to do. And maybe you'd rather do series of very flat graphic design things. Or you might want to do something that's a little bit more naturalistic looking like that. Or everything in between. You could come up with your own idea. So you could combine different techniques, or you could just do something very gestural, like, I'm using some energy in sketching out here, but you might decide, really hold it and use a lot of wrist or a lot of arm. And maybe, I want to just see what happens if I try drawing it like that. A terrified clown that is coming apart. There's no right way of doing it. It's just mainly trying to come up with an idea of what you want to do. Do you want to do something like this? Do you want to do something like that? You want to do something like that? So, okay, so let's put these toys aside. And what I want to do is review with you just some structural things about what you can do if you're doing more than just an object. So and a lot of times too, instead of just drawing a blank piece of paper, if I'm working on a specific composition, I want to be very aware of where the borders are, because as I'm drawing, it's almost like you're making a jigsaw puzzle. You're trying to get all the pieces to come together and you're trying to get it to work out the best way. All right, now whether you're working on something that you want to be extremely realistic, or if you just want to work with creating some kind of abstract space, here are a few things to consider. If I have a shape, all right, and then I've got another shape, okay, when you look at those two things, you really can't tell what's supposed to be close to me and what's far away. But if I overlap them, okay, so even here, if I draw that straight across like that, it's still a little confusing. But if I make it, your eye will continue this shape to assume that it's attached to that shape. And because you can't see the lines here, it means this is in front of that. Now, if you use value, and yesterday we were talking about value, it's the different tones going from black to white. So you have one end here, and then depending on the pressure and what pencil you're using, then you can kind of get to from white to black. You have all these different shades to work with. And if I really want to heighten the sense of that overlapping, I can put a little shadow in there, a little value in there. So that really starts making it look even more so like this is in front of that. And again, these are just rectangular shapes. It could be that you're drawing, one person or a rock. Maybe I'm doing some kind of landscape or drawing like that with some flowers and stuff in through here. If I put a rock here, I have flowers, and I have flowers in through here. A little shadow there. It will form that rock. You can tell this rock is in front of that rock because this one's blocking my view of that one. So overlap is a really good way to kind of get a sense of the order that things are in the space. All right, so another thing, you have two objects. I'm going to draw one of my characters here. All right. Got my friend the pig come in to fill in for us. Now, if he's near the bottom of the page, he's going to look a lot closer without overlapping. I'll draw another little guy over here. Another volunteer here. He's going to look closer to you because he's closer to the bottom of your page. Now, if I overlap him, I'm going to kind of just make a little alteration here. Let's have one more here. Okay, so we got 3 pigs. This guy's closer to the bottom. He's somewhere in between. He's overlapping him. He's overlapping him. He's far up. So that's going to give you a feeling that you're going back into space as you would be walking to approach this guy back here. Now, the other thing that happened, this guy, actually, what I should do is let's bring this down a little farther. I kind of cheated him. He's actually bigger than that. He should be more like this. He's walking out of the picture. That's obvious here. This guy's bigger. So if you look, he's that size, he's that size, he's that size. If you're looking at similar objects, things that are bigger have a tendency to look like they're closer to you than the same object that is farther away. So this is smaller. Now, as I'm doing this, I mean, I'm kind of instructing on stuff. Tomorrow will be primarily everybody drawing on a project. It'll be a step to step. But if you want to draw at the same time I am, just draw circles, set to remind yourself. I got a big circle here. All right, draw it close to the bottom. Draw another one a little smaller and have it overlap. And then maybe over here, have another one. It doesn't have to be overlapped. So in just drawing some circles, and if I want to, I can put little shadows here and there and give them a little bit of shading. So this is closer to the bottom. It's the biggest and it's overlapping. So it's in front. This one is farther up on the page and you draw that. And so that's farther in the distance. And then this one is in between. All right, so you got overlap, you have size variation, you have position on page. Now, the other thing is the contrast and the values. So when I draw this, let's say that this is a rock, we'll keep it simple. I put a real heavy shadow there, and then I can really work on the value. I'm thinking light's coming in from that way, so this will be kind of the highlighted area. Okay, when I get to this one, I'm not going to quite have that same range going from the black through the grays to the white highlight. I'm not going to resort to a real heavy dark black. I'm going to make it just a little more gray and a little fuzzier. And maybe, I could have some other little dents and maybe some veins and stuff in through here. So I'll detail this. When I get to this one, in fact, I'm not even going to, I'm going to erase most of it, come through, and I'll still have a little bit of line in here, but I'll leave that pretty light. And the shadow I put in through here is going to be not as dark and as dramatic as that one. And then when it comes to this one, I'm going to just kind of represent it by a very light tone. and hardly any shadow there. So over a distance, and this is a classic thing if you look at a landscape where you have really bright colors and really a lot of detail in the foreground. And if you look in the background, you know, it might be just a little, hardly any value or any color. And those are like, you know, mountains, the background. As you get a little bit closer, then you see a lot more details. This is called aerial perspective. So things have the most contrast. They're the brightest color if you're doing color, the most detail, the closer they are to you. And as you go back into the distance, then a way to make it look like they are farther away is to reduce the detail and make all the values pretty flat. So the background flattens a little bit as you go farther away. So we have overlap, position on the page, size variation, and then the contrast is sharper and more pronounced in the foreground than as you go in the background. Everything kind of fades away. And the last thing is a lot more technical. And again, this is really only if you're dealing with larger things like landscapes or buildings and stuff. And that's perspective. So you represent where your eye level is. And for 1 point perspective, you pick a point out there, look at an object, whether it's below your sight or above, or in the case of a building, it could be both above and below. But the idea is that all parallel lines go to that. And I think the classic example is like, you know, got telephone poles that are going up. So as they go back into the distance, they get smaller, smaller, smaller until they kind of disappear. And then, you know, if you think about this maybe being a roadway, then, you know, that gets a little bit different, you know, like the shrubs that you would have here. Let me move that over so it's more in the center again. So that, you know, this is kind of a specialized, and everything on this side, it has its complement. 2 point perspective, you've got 2 points. And so if you're like drawing a box, like a building, something like that, then these lines go to that point, these lines go to that point. All right, let's say up here like that, then this comes over here and like that. So if this is some kind of a building, you know, it's got windows and stuff like that, then this is the way it would be a 2 point perspective. I don't want to get too much into that because this is something that is very specific to trying to create landscapes more than anything else, because these kind of simulation of what happens to parallel lines over a distance are dealing just with that infinite distance. And so, you know, if you're inside a room, it's not infinite, but you could kind of keep a little bit of that in mind when you're doing that. But the ones that are the most important are the ones that we covered with this, with the overlap, with the difference in how much detail, the contrast, you know, is lowered and softened. You lose some of the shadows, you lose some of the highlights as you go back into space. Okay, so to kind of summarize what I wanted to do, you know, you start off kind of looking at an apple in terms of its planes. And, you know, again, as I said, if you look at an apple and you cut it in half, it looks like that. But as you rotate it around, you can see that instead of it being the shape that originally was, if you just traced it, you start getting it, you know, so that you have one shape that's like this. So and that's primarily so you get an idea of what's happening, and you can get a sense of where each one of those shapes is relative to the other. And then if you fill in between, you have created, you know, the shape that you're after in terms of, you know, in case you're doing an apple. All right, now, what I wanted to do, we kind of ran out of time yesterday. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? I don't know if you were sketching at the same time I was talking about, but I primarily wanted to use this session and the next session to get ready for tomorrow, which is going to be trying to combine things together and see if you can kind of start getting a sense of what type of drawing you want to do. You don't have to pick one thing, but you can experiment with all sorts of different ways of working. I've come up with that full range of doing my own little characters like this, and also enjoy the challenge of doing something to do a drawing like this that is very, photographic. And then there's all the stuff that's in between. And what I'm trying to do is provide you with some tools and some knowledge materials so that as you start experimenting, you can find out what is going to be the most suitable for the way that you want to approach things. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be using a few extra materials just to give you a little variation what you can do with graphite. These are sets of water-soluble graphite. So with this, if I put water on that, my paper is going to get wet and maybe wrinkle up a bit. But with these pencils, the Aquarelle pencils, they also come in various degrees of softness, but they start with an HB, which is good for sketching, and go up to a 6B. But with these, you can use them, as I normally would with a pencil. This is a 6B, so it's nice and soft. I'll stick with our pig theme here today. And then if I put a little bit of value on there, it's like I could develop the same way that I would using a regular pencil. Okay. And the set comes with a brush, but if I take some water, you can see how it instantly turns into more like a wash. Kind of overdid it on that one. But you get an idea of how that can work. If I want to, I can do a drawing with a traditional graphite pencil, and I can use what's called a resist method. So if I come back with one of these and just very loosely put in where I want shading and the like, or if I have another scrap piece of paper here, I can either come here and use this almost like a watercolor pad, or I can go directly onto the drawing and move that around to where, I want it.
So we do have some questions coming in. What are
Okay,
the 5? Go ahead. What are the 5 things to keep in mind again? Size, detail, contrast. Go ahead.
Okay, so number 1, overlap. Okay, that's when somebody you're in a theater and you're sitting behind somebody with a hat on. Tell them take the hat off because they're blocking your vision. They're overlapping the scene. So overlap. Okay. Size variation. Okay, so as similar objects go back into space, they look smaller. Imagine being on the top of the Empire State Building. You look down, you see a bunch of ants walking around on the sidewalk, but you know that they are the same things or the same people that would be standing next to you. So size variation, position on the page, So if this is my page here and he's walked out, he's the closest because he's at the bottom. And then as you go farther up the page, it's assumed that you're going back into space. So essentially, you're kind of saying, all right, here is the ground. All right, but on a flat piece of paper, I'm going to make this the scale here. So if this is the ground, you're not looking straight down at it, you're looking at it from that direction. So if you have something, I'll make some X's here. Here's an X, and here's an X, and here's an X. If you're flying above that, you can see them all there. But if you think about on a flat piece of paper, you're drawing something that's going away from you, you see what's happening. All right, the bottom of the paper is here. So this X here definitely is closest to me. And then as they get farther away from my pencil, when you're thinking about going up that way, okay? So position on the page. All right, then there's the contrast or lack of it over space. This is referred to as aerial perspective. Okay, so we got overlap. Also the detail. So you can see the stripes in his pants because he's close to you. Kind of see the stripes there. And those are just kind of like a suggestion that his pants are striped too. So detail, and then you have the very technical way of ordering space that was developed in the Renaissance, and that is linear perspective, and that's with vanishing points and all that kind of stuff. And that could be an entire series of lessons in itself. That is perspective. So for linear perspective, that is pretty much used whenever you're dealing with an infinite space, outside. You can't see, you can only see to the horizon line, right? And so it's very mathematical, very geometric, the way that works on. And I think if you just generally know that things get smaller the farther away they get, so that means if you have the distance in a railroad track close to you, by the time it's really far away, that distance, and since they're straight lines, it's going to be something like this, where they'll be like that. And then along the line, you're going to have bigger and bigger telephone poles. So that can help create it. But this is, again, primarily used for outdoor scenes. Any more questions? Okay. Well, this is,
the aqua graphite. Can you erase it once it's dry?
That you're kind of stuck with it. So this one where I thought that I really soaked it up too much and lost the detail, it just means that it just looks like he's got a heavy beard. He's got a shave. So that when it does dry, it isn't quite as much. And you can work back over on top of it. I mean, you can always add to it. So my suggestion was, until you get kind of used to it, think about starting off conservatively, because once it dries, you can put more on top of it. And that's the one thing that's important, is that if you have used the water-soluble graphite, before you start doing anything on top of it, unless you're using a brush to maybe transfer some more of the graphite. Let's say that I want to kind of make that a little bit darker and through there yet. Really gave him a beard. I want to wait until it dries, because if it's still wet and you start marking it up with a pencil again, even though these are very soft leads, you might start tearing the paper, and then it's going to be really obviously flawed. So go ahead and start conservatively putting your value in. And then if you want to add more, start working someplace else, or have a hair dryer or something like that, you can speed draw it. But you don't want to work on the paper when it's wet, unless you're using a brush, because otherwise you're going to disturb the surface and maybe even tear the surface of the paper. The other thing I wanted to mention was that there's also another set, if I can find it here. I had it all laid out, so I wouldn't have to be searching for stuff. Okay, well, this is matte graphite, and you might notice that when you take a standard pencil like this 8B, I can get it pretty dark. But one of the complaints people may have occasionally, if you have a really large area of black. Let's see if I can get this to work on camera here. It's shiny. You can kind of see right there in the center of it, there's kind of a white reflection. And so if you're working on really, really heavy areas, sometimes that can be a little disturbing because it's difficult to be in a light where that isn't going to be problematic. So with the matte graphic, when I do a similar thing, it's not going to be shiny. And the advantage with this formulation, whatever it is that they have in the matrix to make the pencil originally, to make it so it isn't shiny, it has enabled them to really load it up with graphite. It also strengthens the lead. And so right now I'm using a 12B. So if you want a really, really rich black, then you can get a 12B. The softest one is a 14B, so you can get even a little bit darker. And so you can kind of tell, even on the camera here, I'll bring it up a little closer. All right, you see as I'm kind of moving the page, there's very little reflection on the matte graphite as opposed to this is the more traditional, it's shiny, and it's still dark. And when you look at it, oh, that's really good. But then when you compare it to the matte, so if you're really interested in getting heavy contrast, then you might want to get a set of the matte. So it's, I'll see if I can get it close enough. You can see it. There's PITT Graphic Matte. All right. Now, about smudging, scrap piece of paper. So as you're working on your drawing, have something underneath your hand. That way, I mean, this definitely is going to, I don't know if it shows up or not, but as I go over some of these graphite, and sometimes you don't want that to happen if you develop a very delicate balance between values and you start smearing it, you're going to lose the crispness and all that detail. I mean, it's not too tough to clean that up with a kneaded eraser, but if you have real heavy, soft areas of graphite, the best thing you do is put like a piece of tracing paper, like freezer wrap, a scrap piece of white paper. And that way you're not smudging what you've already done. Okay, any other questions?
No, I think we're ready to wrap up and get ready for tomorrow.
Okay, now tomorrow, what I would suggest, think about maybe, looking around. I mean, I would come with, like a spaceman or little Donald Duck. I mean, might be interesting to try drawing a piece of fruit that's been sitting outside all day, whatever. But think about what you might like to try to draw. If you don't want to draw anything, if you just want to work with abstraction and patterns, that's totally fine too. Again, I'm not telling you what you have to do. I'm just giving you techniques, and then you can think, oh, this would be a good time to do this technique, and I want to do this. So tomorrow, we'll start to develop a drawing, and we'll see how far we get with it. So, I'd like you to be 100% participatory tomorrow. So bring your pencils, your paper, your erasers, and think about what it is that you want to draw, or like I do most of the times, just rely on your own images that are rolling around in your brain, and you can draw that. Okay, well, everybody have a good rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.